when the babysitter's secret was finally exposed, the missing child. Before we dive into tonight's story, remember, every click brings us closer to the truth. So hit subscribe, leave a comment if you dare, and stay until the end, because this one will haunt you long after the screen goes dark. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days in Grays Harbor County, Washington. It poured against the faded blue siding of a small farmhouse on a hill, the kind of place that looked ordinary until you looked closer, until you realized the toys scattered in the yard belonged to a child who wasn't there anymore. Oakley Carlson had been missing for days. Her parents, Jordan Bowers and Andrew Carlson, claimed she was fine, but no one had seen her since Thanksgiving. Sheriff's deputies arrived at the property after a welfare check request from Oakley's former foster parents. They'd called multiple times, worried that something wasn't right. When detectives stepped inside, the first thing they noticed was the smell. A mix of mildew, rot, and something burned. The walls were covered in soot, as if a fire had happened months ago. But there was no fire report, no cleanup, just the remnants of something scorched and secret. Detective Sergeant Harris knelt by the fireplace, brushing away ash and bits of charred paper. "This wasn't an accident," he murmured. "Someone burned something they didn't want found." Jordan Bowers stood in the doorway, her face pale but her tone sharp. "You don't have a warrant for that," she said. Her voice trembled, not from fear of the police, but from something deeper, something heavy with guilt. In the next room, Andrew Carlson sat slumped on the couch. When asked about Oakley, he said she was staying with friends. He couldn't remember their names, couldn't give an address, couldn't explain why his other children looked terrified whenever her name was mentioned. Then came the interview with Oakley's sister, just 6 years old. Her words would unravel everything. "She's gone," the little girl whispered. "Mom said the wolves took her." Detectives exchanged glances. The phrase didn't make sense until they learned that Jordan had told her children to say those exact words if anyone asked about Oakley. The wolves took her. It sounded like a story told to hide something much darker. The investigation turned inside out. Neighbors recalled strange sounds at night, Oakley's cries echoing from inside a locked room. Others said they hadn't seen her in months. When police searched the property again, they found a small closet sealed from the outside. Inside were crayon drawings, stick figures, a sun, and one word scribbled again and again: "Help." The foster mother who once cared for Oakley wept when she learned what had happened. "We tried to warn them," she said. "We told them something was wrong when they sent her back." Oakley was scared of going home. Every new lead brought more horror. School officials admitted Oakley hadn't been enrolled for nearly a year. Child Services had closed her case. Everyone had assumed she was safe, until now. Meanwhile, the media swarmed Grays Harbor. Headlines read, "Where is Oakley Carlson?" Talk shows debated who was to blame, the parents, the system, or the silence of neighbors who didn't want to get involved. But for Detective Harris and his team, it wasn't about headlines. It was about finding a child, or finding her remains. Late one night, detectives executed a full search warrant. The team combed through the property with flashlights and dogs, turning over every inch of soil near the house. Underneath the shed, they found burned fabric, later confirmed to be from a child's pajama set. The air went cold. Harris turned to his partner. "If this is what I think it is," he said, "we're looking at more than a missing person." Jordan and Andrew were taken in for questioning. They insisted Oakley was alive, but refused to explain the inconsistencies. Their stories kept changing. One said she was at a friend's house. Another said she'd been taken by Child Protective Services. But there were no records, no witnesses, nothing. Then came the moment that made even the toughest detectives' stomachs twist. A forensic analyst found traces of blood beneath the floorboards in the children's bedroom. Faint, but human. A match would take days, but everyone already knew whose it likely was. Detective Harris stared at the evidence bag, his mind spinning through possibilities. He'd seen cruelty before, but never this quiet, this hidden. "If we don't find that girl soon," he muttered, "the truth will be buried with her." Outside, the press lights flickered against the rain. Reporters shouted questions no one dared answer. Inside, the parents sat in silence, faces blank as stone. Somewhere between guilt and madness, they seemed to believe their own story, that the wolves had come and taken Oakley away. But wolves leave tracks, and what the police were about to uncover would be far worse than any animal attack. When they pried open the basement door, a door neither parent had mentioned, one covered by a rug and locked from the outside, a rush of stale air escaped. The flashlight beam flickered over cracked concrete, discarded toys, and something else lying in the corner. Detective Harris froze. His radio crackled. The room went silent. Because whatever was in that basement would change everything. The Basement Secret. Before we begin, remember, monsters don't always hide in the dark. Sometimes they live right next door. So if you're still here, hit subscribe, because the truth you're about to hear is worse than fiction. The air in the basement was thick, cold, and heavy with silence. The beam of Detective Harris's flashlight trembled as it slid across the floor, over old boxes, torn bedding, and tiny handprints smeared in dust. He motioned for the forensics team to step closer. "Careful," he whispered. "Don't touch anything until we document it." In the corner lay a small blanket, pink, faded, and scorched at the edges. Oakley's name was stitched in one corner, the thread almost worn away. Beside it sat a cracked plastic cup filled with dried fruit snacks and a small stuffed bear, missing one eye. Everything was covered in soot, as if someone had tried to burn the evidence, then changed their mind. The forensics photographer snapped photos while another officer bagged items with gloved hands. Then, the light caught something else. A small wooden chair with a leather strap attached to one leg. A restraint. It was child-sized. The silence in the room deepened until all anyone could hear was the steady drip of rain leaking through the floorboards above. Harris turned to his partner, Detective Ruiz. "She was kept down here," he said quietly. Ruiz nodded, unable to speak. Back upstairs, Jordan Bowers sat at the kitchen table, her arms crossed. When detectives confronted her with what they found, she didn't cry. She didn't deny it either. "She was difficult," she said finally, her voice almost calm. "She wouldn't listen." "Where is she now, Jordan?" Harris demanded. "What happened to your daughter?" "She's gone," she said, staring at the wall. "I told you, the wolves took her," but the truth was already unraveling. Investigators discovered Jordan and Andrew had been using methamphetamine heavily for months. Child Protective Services had visited before, but each time the couple cleaned just enough to pass inspection. The kids were always told what to say, coached to smile and stay quiet. Oakley's older sister had lived in constant fear. When interviewed again, she finally broke down and said, "Mom and Dad made Oakley stay in the room when she was bad. She cried a lot. Then she stopped." Evidence piled up fast. Cell phone data showed searches like, "How long before smell starts after death?" and "Burning clothes to get rid of evidence." There were financial transactions too. Gas cans, bleach, and a shovel purchased days after Oakley was last seen. But there was still no body. The case exploded across the nation. The missing girl from Grays Harbor became a headline everywhere. Talk shows, news reports, podcasts. Strangers online shared Oakley's photo, hoping for a miracle. Candlelight vigils filled the small town, her face glowing in posters illuminated by candle flames and flashlights. But behind the scenes, detectives were losing hope. Without remains, prosecutors couldn't charge for homicide. All they had were lies, inconsistencies, and signs of abuse. Then, Weeks later, the case took an even darker turn. A neighbor came forward. She said she'd seen something strange the winter before Oakley disappeared. Smoke rising from the back of the Carlson property late at night. The smell of chemicals in the air. She hadn't reported it then. "I didn't want to get involved," she said quietly. Search teams returned with cadaver dogs. The scent trail led them behind the shed to a patch of disturbed soil. They dug for hours under the cold drizzle, finding nothing but ashes and fragments of burned plastic. But inside one melted lump, they recover a piece of fabric, the same pattern as the pajamas found earlier. The tests confirmed it. Traces of Oakley's DNA. The community shattered. People demanded justice. The story was everywhere now, from Washington to London. Every headline carried the same haunting question. Where is Oakley Carlson? When the detectives confronted Andrew again, he broke. In the interrogation room, his hands shook as he spoke. "It wasn't supposed to happen," he said. "Jordan lost it. Oakley wouldn't stop crying. She said she was going to teach her a lesson. I didn't stop her." He buried his face in his hands. "I should have stopped her." The confession was fragmented, incomplete, but it was enough to confirm what investigators had long suspected. Oakley hadn't run away. She hadn't been taken by wolves. She'd been hidden, silenced, and erased by the people who were supposed to protect her. When the news broke, the entire country reeled. Commentators called it one of the most disturbing child abuse cases in the state's history. Even seasoned officers broke down as they described the conditions of the home. But the story didn't end there. Months later, as legal proceedings dragged on, a new piece of evidence emerged. Old home security footage from a neighbor's camera. On a rainy night around the time Oakley vanished, the video captured Jordan and Andrew loading black bags into their truck and driving toward a wooded area 15 miles away. Police returned there, combing through every inch of forest. They found no body, but they did find a child's shoe buried under leaves, half burned. The pattern matched Oakley's last known footwear. The prosecution built its case on circumstantial evidence: the basement, the blood, the confessions. While the parents faced charges related to abuse and child endangerment, the disappearance itself remained officially unsolved. There was still no proof of death, no closure, no peace. Detective Harris stood at the edge of the woods during the final search, watching the fog drift between trees. "We failed her," he said quietly. "Everyone did. Oakley Carlson's story remains open, her body never found, her memory kept alive by those who still demand answers." The official case files describe it as an ongoing investigation, but in the hearts of those who followed it, the verdict is clear. Her truth was buried long before the world started looking. And as the screen fades to black, a whisper lingers, a reminder that the real monsters aren't in stories or shadows. They're in plain sight. If this story chilled you to the bone, the narrator says, voice low and steady, you're not ready for the next one. Subscribe, because next time, the secret hits even closer to home.